fond of history and was doing graduate work in the subject of. Oops. If the dog don't quit knocking down stuff out my hands. uh, sorry about that. He was doing graduate work at the time, in the subject at the time of the murder. Unlike Leopold, he was not overly interested in intellectual pursuits, preferring to socialize, play tennis, and read detective novels. So these two guys are very rich, very intelligent. Let's see.
Those are often the people to be most terrified about.
Exactly. The two young men grew up in their respective families in an affluent Kidwood neighborhood in Chicago's South Side. Loeb owned a summer estate now called Castle Farms in Charlevoix, Michigan, in addition to the mansion in Kenwood, 2 blocks from the Leopold home. Though Leopold and Loeb knew each other casually while growing up, they began to see more of each other in the mid-1920s, and a relationship flourished at the University of Chicago, particularly after he discovered a mutual interest in crime. Leopold was particularly fascinated by Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of Superman, the Ubermensch. Yeah, we all know that one. Usually people believe that. Usually doesn't end well.
Historically, no.
Nope. Interpreting them as a translucent individual possessing extraordinary and unusual capabilities, whose superior intellects allows them to rise above the laws and rules that bound the unimportant average populace. Leopold believed that he, and especially Loeb, were these individuals as such, and by interpretation of Nietzsche's doctrines, they were not bound by any society's normal ethics or rules. In a letter to Loeb, Leopold wrote, "A Superman is on account of a certain superior qualities inherent in him, specified from the ordinary laws which govern man. He is not liable for anything that he may do." The pair began exerting their perceived immunity with normal restrictions with acts of petty theft and vandalism. Breaking into fraternity house at the University of Michigan, they stole penknives, a camera, and a typewriter, which they later used to type their ransom note. In Bolton, they progressed to a series of more serious crimes, including arson, but no one seemed to notice. Disappointed with the absence of media coverage of the crimes, they decided to plan and execute a sensational perfect crime, which would garner public attention and confirm their self-perceived status as Superman. What do you think so far?
Lots of narcissism.
Yep. And also they were having a sexual relationship, supposedly.
All right.
With each other.
So, like, some repression mixed in.
Yeah.
That's
and I believe also Loeb, governor, said pretty much encouraged him to skip several grades, was also tutoring him. He was also, in the past, had a sexual relationship with her, and she was, I believe, in her late 30s, early 40s, and he was like 12 or 13.
Yikes!
So, yeah, he was being molested. Excuse me, that's not a sexual relationship. He was being molested.
Yikes.
But he didn't view it as molesting. But he was molested. So, Leopold, which at the time was 19-year-old old, and Loeb, settled on a kidnapping and murder of adolescents as their perfect crime. They spent 7 months planning everything from the method of abduction to the disposal of the body. To obscure the precise nature of their crime and motive, they decided to make a ransom demand and devise an elaborate, intricate plan for collecting it, involving a long series of complex delivery instructions to be communicated, one set at a time by phone. They typed the final set of instructions, including the actual money drop in the form of a ransom note, using a typewriter they stole from the University of Michigan fraternity house. A chisel was selected as the murder weapon and purchased. After a lengthy search for a suitable victim, mostly on the grounds of Harvard School for Boys in the Kenwood area, where Loeb had been educated, they finally decide upon Robert Bobby Franks, a 14-year-old son of a wealthy Chicago watchmaker, Jacob Franks. Leopold knew Bobby Franks well. Bobby was a second cousin of an across-the-street neighbor, and they had played tennis at the Loeb residence several times. The pair put their carefully crafted plan in motion on the afternoon of May 21st, 1924. Using an automobile that Leopold had rented under the name Morton B. Ballard, they offered Franks a ride as he walked home from school. The boy refused initially, since his destination was less than 2 blocks away, but Loeb persuaded him to enter the car to discuss the tennis racket that he had been using. The precise sequence of events of that day following remains in dispute, but a preponderance of opinion placed Leopold behind the wheel of the car, while Loeb sat in the back seat with the chisel. Loeb struck Franks, sitting in the front of him in the passenger seat, several times in the head with the chisel, and dragged him into the back seat when he was gagged and soon died. With the body on the floorboard out of view, Leopold and Loeb drove to the predetermined dumping spot near Wolf Lake in Hammond, Indiana, which is 25 miles south of Chicago. I showed you Wolf Lake.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Yeah, we passed it by driving last week. I can't remember.
Time is no meaning.
Yes. After nightfall, they removed and discarded Frank's clothes and concealed the body in the covert across from the Philadelphia Railroad tracks north of the lake. To obscure the body's identity, they poured hydraulic acid on his face, also on his genitals, to disguise the fact that he'd been circumcised. By the time the two men returned to Chicago, word had already spread that Franks was missing. Leopold called Frank's mother, identifying himself as George Johnson, and told her that Franks had been kidnapped. Instructions for delivering the ransom note would follow. After mailing the typed ransom note, burning their stained clothing, and cleaning the bloodstains from the rented vehicle's upholstery the best they could, they spent the remainder of the evening playing cards.
Psychopaths.
Big ass psychos. They think they're going to get away with it.
Also, let's just talk about that chisel. That's brutal.
Yeah.
That's some extra, next levels of brutality right there.
Yeah, that's some inhuman shit that they're all often doing, and oh god, I don't even want to think about it. Is this?
Yikes.
Oh boy. So, once the Franks family received the ransom note the following morning, Leopold called a second time and dictated the first set of ransom payment instructions. The intricate plan stalled almost immediately when a nervous family member forgot the address of the store where he was supposed to receive the next set of directions. It was abandoned entirely when word came of Frank's body had been found. Leopold and Loeb destroyed the typewriter and burnt a car robe, lap blanket, they used to move the body. Then they went about their lives as usual. The Chicago police launched an intensive investigation. Rewards were offered for information. While Loeb went about his daily routine quietly, Leopold spoke freely to police and reporters, offering theories to any who would listen. He even told one detective, if I were to murder anybody, it would be just as such a cocky little son of a bitch as Bobby Franks. Then the police found a pair of eyeglasses near the body. Though uncommon in prescription and frame, they were fitted with an unusual hinge purchased by only 3 customers in Chicago. One of them was Leopold. When questioned, Leopold offered the possibility that his glasses might have been dropped out of his pocket during a bird-watching trip the previous weekend. The destroyed typewriter was recovered from the Jackson Park Lagoon on June 7th. The 2 men were summoned for formal questioning on May 29th. They asserted that night of the murder they picked up 2 women in Chicago using Leopold's car and dropped them off somewhere later near a golf course without learning their last names. Their alibi was exposed as a fabrication when Leopold's chauffeur told police he was repairing Leopold's car the night the men claimed they were using it. The chauffeur's wife later confirmed the car was parked in Leopold's garage on the night of the murder. So how did they get caught? Well, they confessed. Loeb confessed first. He asserted that Leopold had planned everything and he killed Franks in the backseat of the car while Loeb drove. Leopold's confession followed swiftly thereafter, but he insisted that he was the driver and Loeb was the murderer. Their confessions otherwise corroborated most of the evidence in the case. Leopold later claimed in his book, long after he wrote a book, They pleaded in vain with Loeb to admit to killing Franks. Mopsy feels less terrible than she might, thinking you did it. He quotes Loeb as saying, and I'm not going to take the shred of comfort away from her. Most observers believe that Loeb did indeed strike the fatal blows. Some circumstantial evidence, including testimony from eyewitness Carl Uvig, said he saw Loeb driving and Leopold in the backseat minutes before the kidnapping, suggesting that Leopold could have been the killer. Both Leopold and Loeb admitted they were driven by their thrill-seeking, uber-niche delusions and their aspirations to commit the perfect crime. Neither claimed to have looked forward to the killing itself, though Leopold admitted interest in learning what it would feel like to be a murderer. He was disappointed to note that he felt the same as ever.
Psychopath.
Fucking psychos.
Psychopath.
So, oh god, these guys are fucking psychos. So the trial of Leopold Loeb took place in Chicago's Cook County Courthouse, which is now Courthouse Place. Where is Courthouse Place? 54 from West Hubbard Street, New York North Side. Okay. It became a media spectacle, and the third after those of Harry Thaw and Scotcho Vancetti, the anarchist, to be labeled the trial of the century. Just keep giving trial of the century. They gave trial
what
of the century.
hasn't been the trial of the century?
Well, we had the trials of the century this century. Casey Anthony. I can't think of anything else. Last century was OJ. It was a bunch of other things. Yeah, everything's a trial of the century. Loeb's family hired Clarence Darrow, who was one of the most well-renowned criminal defense lawyers in the country and the lead of the defense team. It was rumored that Darrow was paid $1 million at the time, though he was actually paid $70,000, which is equivalent to $1 million today. Darrow took the case because he was a starch opponent of the capital punishment, like I explained before. While it was initially assumed that the men's defense would be based on a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, Darrow concluded that a jury trial would almost certainly end a conviction and death penalty. Thus, he entered a plea of guilty, hoping to convince Cook County Circuit Court Judge John R. Calvary to impose sentences of life in prison. So, the state's attorney, Richard E. Crowe, presented over 100 witnesses documenting details of the crime. The defense presented extreme psychiatric testimony in efforts to establish mitigating circumstances, including childhood neglect in the form of active parents, and in Leopold's case, sexual abuse by governance. Darrow called in a series of expert witnesses who offered a catalog of Leopold Loeb's abnormalities. One witness testified that the delusional indoctrinate glands, another to the delusions that led to their crime. Got any thoughts so far?
Just that, I mean, at the end of the day, they're still psychopaths, and a lot of it is nature versus nurture, but, you know, they wanted to kill, they wanted to know what it was like, they did it in a brutal way, and they said that they didn't feel anything after.
Yeah.
Like, pretty, like, case closed for me.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah, that's what Darrow was saying, but he was so against the death penalty. He wanted to keep these guys off of the electric chair. And mainly his impassioned 12-hour-long masterful plea at the conclusion of the hearing, which was called one of the finest speeches of his career, mainly got it off. I'm not going to go through the whole speech because it's fucking long as fuck. But let's do some excerpts, like this one. Now, Your Honor, I have spoken about war. I believe in it. I do not know whether I was crazy or not. Sometimes I think perhaps I was. I approved of it. I joined in the general cry of madness and despair. I urged men to fight. I was safe because I was too old to go. I was like the rest. What did they do? Right or wrong, justifiable or unjustifiable, which I need not discuss today, it changed the world. For 4 long years, the civilized world was engaged in killing men. Christian against Christian, barbarian barbarian uniting with Christian to kill Christian, anything to kill. It was taught in every school, as in the Sunday schools. And little